She was humiliated in a luxury store, but her millionaire daughter walked in and shut everyone up. Dressed simply, the cleaning lady was treated like trash by the saleswomen, who had no idea who she really was. Minutes later, her daughter entered, award-winning, wealthy, and famous worldwide, and made sure to reveal the truth. Her response was so powerful that it changed not only that store, but the way the entire country sees respect and origins. The Greenwich Galleria shimmered that Saturday afternoon. Mirrored storefronts reflected the light of the setting sun, while shoppers carried bags from international designer brands. Among the well-dressed crowd, Constance Johnson walked hesitantly, as out of place as a wildflower from the Mississippi Delta amidst the concrete of New York City. At 63, Constance Johnson still maintained an upright posture, a legacy of the water buckets she carried on her head during her childhood in rural Mississippi. Her gray hair was neatly tied in a simple bun. Her rough hands revealed decades of domestic work, and the floral dress, bought years ago at a clearance sale in Queens, had been meticulously ironed for the special occasion. Constance took a deep breath before entering the boutique. Elegance, known for its formal gowns that often graced the covers of magazines, a blonde sales associate shot her a quick glance and whispered something to her colleague. Both of them giggled discreetly. Constance pretended not to notice. She was used to being invisible. "Can I help you?" a salesperson finally asked after Constance had spent nearly 15 minutes timidly examining the dresses. "Yes, miss. I need a dress for an important event. My daughter is receiving an award and we have some pieces on sale in the back." The salesperson pointed to a distant corner where clothes from past seasons were kept. "You might find something that fits your profile." The condescending tone stung Constance, but she just smiled and thanked her. She walked to the indicated section, where the items had red discount tags. Her fingers touched the fabric of a faded pink dress, clearly unsold for several seasons. "This isn't the kind of dress I'm looking for," she murmured to herself. Gathering her courage, she returned to the main area of the store. As she browsed the racks ignored by the sales staff, Constance remembered her arrival in New York City almost 40 years ago. She had come from a small town in Mississippi with a cardboard suitcase and a heart full of dreams. There she had met David, a hard-working young man who operated machinery in an auto parts factory in the Bronx. They married quickly, in love and full of plans. They had rented a small room in the back of a house in the Bronx. Constance had found a job as a cleaner in a commercial building on Park Avenue. She would wake up at 4 in the morning, face a 2-hour commute on a crowded subway, and clean enormous offices before the executives arrived in their imported cars. At night, she took on extra ironing jobs to supplement their income. When she discovered she was pregnant, their happiness was immense. Danielle was born strong, with her father's lively eyes and her mother's quiet determination. But life, already difficult, became nearly impossible when David suffered a fatal stroke just 5 months after their daughter was born. "Ma'am?" The salesperson's voice broke through her memories. "These pieces aren't for sale. They're from the new collection, not yet tagged." Constance hadn't even realized her thoughts had led her to another section of the store. She felt her face burn with shame. "I'm sorry, miss. I didn't realize." "Look," the salesperson lowered her voice as if doing a favor. "Perhaps you're in the wrong place. Our pieces start at $3,900. For simpler events, I'd recommend some stores downtown." The ma'am from the young woman's mouth sounded like an insult. Constance swallowed hard. She had saved for months for this moment. The $5,000 tucked away in an envelope inside her purse represented daily sacrifices, small renunciations accumulated over a year. She wanted to look beautiful for her daughter. She wanted to show that she too belonged to this world that Danielle had conquered. "I understand, miss, but I'd like to see that navy blue model from the window display." The salesperson sighed impatiently. "That's one of our most expensive. It costs $7,800. Could I try it on anyway?" "Unfortunately, it's reserved for a client." The lie was obvious, but Constance didn't have the energy to confront her. The only thing she wanted now was to leave this place that made her feel so small. Constance was heading for the exit when a firm, familiar voice filled the room. "Mom!" "Sorry I'm late." Danielle Johnson entered the store as if stepping onto a battlefield. At 38, she radiated confidence. Her natural afro framed a face with striking features. Her dark skin glowed under an emerald green dress that highlighted her figure. Her high heels echoed on the marble floor like declarations of her presence. The sales staff immediately stood straighter. The manager, who until then hadn't deigned to appear, emerged from the back office. "Good afternoon, Miss Johnson. What an honor to have you in our store." The woman smiled, extending her hand. "I saw your interview in Forbes magazine. The work your company is doing is fantastic." Danielle returned the greeting with professional courtesy, her eyes quickly assessing the situation. She knew that look on her mother's face, the wounded dignity carefully hidden beneath a gentle smile. "I'm here with my mother. She's looking for a dress for an important event." Danielle put her arm around Constance's shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and proud. "Of course, we'd be honored to assist her," the manager replied, casting a disapproving glance at the salesperson who had dismissed Constance. "That navy blue dress in the window would be perfect," Danielle continued. "Could you show it to us?" "Immediately." The manager snapped her fingers at the associate. "Lucy, fetch the Splendor model in." "What is your size, ma'am?" 12, Constance answered shyly. "We only have it up to a size 10, Lucy said quickly, looking relieved. "What a shame," Danielle commented, her voice calm, but with a firmness that seemed to lower the temperature in the store. "I would have thought a chain like Elegance would carry a diverse range of sizes. After all, real women don't all fit a mannequin's proportions." The silence was heavy for a few seconds. The manager tried to salvage the situation. "We can check with our main branch if—" "That won't be necessary," Danielle interrupted. "My mother deserves to be treated with dignity wherever she goes. We'll look elsewhere." As they left the store, Constance held her daughter's arm, trying to calm her down. "Danielle, you don't need to be upset. I'm used to it." Danielle stopped in the mall corridor, turning to face her mother. Her eyes shone with a mixture of sadness and indignation. "That's exactly the problem. Mom, no one should get used to being treated like this." She held her mother's hands, looking at every mark, every callus that told stories of sacrifice. "Tomorrow, when I walk onto that stage to receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award, it will be because of you. Every step I've taken was on floors that you cleaned. It's time the world saw that." Constance felt her eyes well up but held back the tears. Her entire life had been an exercise in restraint. She had worked in homes where crying was forbidden, getting sick was forbidden, existing beyond her function was forbidden. Now, under her daughter's loving gaze, she felt that perhaps it was time to allow herself to be seen, not just as the housekeeper, the widow, or the struggling mother, but as Constance Johnson, a whole woman. Night fell, and with it, the rest that Constance rarely allowed herself. In the small two-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, secured after decades of renting, she sat in the worn-out armchair in the living room while Danielle prepared tea in the kitchen. "Mom, tomorrow before the ceremony, we're going to Elegance House. I spoke with Mrs. Marcia. She'll be waiting for us with some options." Constance nodded silently, lost in thought. Her memories took her back to the past, when she found herself alone with an infant daughter in a large, unforgiving city. After losing David, Constance had faced a cruel reality. The small Social Security benefit barely covered the rent. She intensified her work schedule, taking on cleaning jobs on weekends and night shifts when possible. She left Danielle with Mrs. Josephine, an elderly neighbor who agreed to look after the girl for a small fee. Her first full-time employer was Mrs. Mercedes, the wife of a banker who lived on the Upper East Side. The enormous house required double the effort, and Constance worked tirelessly to keep the job. She would wake up at 4:30 a.m. to arrive by 6:30 a.m. when she started preparing the family's breakfast. She cleaned, washed, ironed, and cooked. She would return home at 8 p.m., often too exhausted to do more than kiss her already sleeping daughter. "Do you remember Mrs. Mercedes, Danielle?" Constance asked, holding the cup of tea her daughter had brought her. "How could I forget? That's where I learned to read." Danielle sat on the sofa next to her mother. Danielle was 6 years old when she started accompanying her mother during school holidays. Constance had no one to leave her with, and Mrs. Mercedes, in a rare act of kindness, allowed the girl to stay in the small room out back, as long as she didn't make any noise. Little Danielle, always quiet and observant, would spend hours flipping through the books she found on the library shelves while her mother worked. One day, Paul, Mrs. Mercedes's eldest son, found Danielle trying to decipher the words in a storybook. At only 12, but already showing a rare sensitivity, he offered to teach her to read properly. Those impromptu lessons on January afternoons changed Danielle's destiny. When she entered the local public school, she could already read better than most of her second-grade classmates. The teachers soon noticed her potential, and one of them, Ms. Peterson, became her mentor, providing her with extra books and encouraging her to participate in academic competitions. "Paul was an angel in our lives," Constance commented. "I remember when he convinced his mother to pay for half of your SAT prep course." "Yes, and you took the other half from your savings for dental work," Danielle completed, a lump in her throat. "You spent another year with a toothache so I could study for my college entrance exams." Constance waved her hand dismissively. "It was nothing, honey. You can endure a toothache, but you can't let an opportunity pass you by." Constance had never told Danielle about all the humiliations she had faced, like when Mrs. Elvira, her second employer, accused her of stealing a brooch that was later found in the lady's own drawer, or how Dr. Franklin, her third employer's husband, made inappropriate comments when his wife wasn't home, forcing her to quit and start over somewhere else. To protect her daughter's dignity, Constance hid the tears shed on crowded subways on her way home. She saved every penny, often eating just bread and margarine for lunch to ensure Danielle had new notebooks, a uniform without patches, and the fee for school trips. "Do you remember Mrs. Celeste?" Danielle asked, interrupting her mother's thoughts. "How could I forget?" Constance smiled. "The best employer I ever had." Mrs. Celeste, a retired university professor, had been the only one who treated Constance as an equal. At her home in Greenwich Village, Constance worked 3 times a week and was invited to have lunch at the table with the family. It was Mrs. Celeste who, noticing Danielle's potential during a visit with her mother, suggested the girl try for a scholarship at the school where her own daughter taught. "If it weren't for her, I never would have studied at the Renewal Academy." The Renewal Academy, a traditional private institution in New York, offered 2 full scholarships annually to public school students. With Mrs. Celeste's guidance, Danielle applied at 14 and won first place. The transition wasn't easy. The daughter of a domestic worker, a resident of the Bronx, Danielle faced the veiled prejudice of her wealthy classmates. Some parents even questioned the presence of a girl on welfare at their children's school. But Danielle, forged in her mother's silent resilience, turned every obstacle into a stepping stone. "I remember every one of your sacrifices, Mom," Danielle continued, holding Constance's rough hands, "when you took extra cleaning jobs on Sundays to buy the lab equipment I needed in my senior year. How you saved water by showering with a bucket to pay for my graduation trip." Constance smiled, her eyes misty. "And it was worth it, wasn't it? My daughter at Columbia, with a degree in computer engineering. The first in the family to have a diploma." Danielle's admission to university had been just the beginning. With exemplary grades, she secured a research grant in her sophomore year. In her junior year, she was selected for an exchange program in the United States, at the renowned Stanford University. Constance sold the only valuable asset she owned, a small plot of land inherited from her parents in Mississippi, to supplement the grant and ensure her daughter had everything she needed during her 6 months abroad. "You know what hurt the most, Danielle?" Constance said after a long silence. "It was seeing how people treated me differently when I told them my daughter was studying in California. Suddenly, the same people who barely greeted me wanted to know details, as if I had finally become a real person." Danielle squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "They never understood that you were always so much more than the work you did." Constance rose slowly, her back aching after decades bent over floors and sinks. She walked to the small altar in the corner of the room, where she kept a photo of David next to an image of the Virgin Mary. "Your father would be so proud," she murmured, adjusting the picture frame. "He always said you would go far." "He's with me in every achievement too," Danielle replied, hugging her mother from behind. "Just like you are." On the adjacent wall, simply framed, was a clipping from the New York Times from 5 years ago. Former scholarship student from the Bronx creates $1 million startup, revolutionizing digital education. The photo showed a smiling Danielle, alongside her team, in front of the logo of EduTech America. the company she had founded after returning from California. Starting with a simple app to democratize access to programming education, Danielle had conquered the national market and later expanded to Latin America. Her differential, a focus on underserved communities, affordable prices and scholarships for talented young people from public schools. What had begun in a small rented office in downtown Manhattan now occupied 3 floors on Park Avenue and employed over 200 people. "Let's get some sleep." "Mom, tomorrow is a big day," Danielle said, leading Constance to her room. "And don't worry about the dress. We'll find the perfect one." Constance nodded, but before entering her room, she turned to her daughter. "You know, Danielle, every time I go into one of those stores, I remember the first time I bought you a new notebook. I had saved for weeks. When we got to the stationery store, you were enchanted by so many options, and I pretended I could buy any of them, even though I knew I only had money for the simplest one. And I chose the simplest one anyway," Danielle completed, remembering. "I said I liked the plain blue cover better than the colorful ones. You always knew how to read my soul, honey. Ever since you were little." Constance smiled, her eyes shining with memories. "Tomorrow I want to be by your side, not as the mother who needs protecting, but as the woman who walked every step of the way with you. That's why the dress matters. It's not vanity. It's dignity. And dignity, Mom, is something no one can take from you, even if they try." The two embraced for a long time before retiring for the night. In her simple room, lying in the bed Danielle had insisted on buying to replace the old one, Constance allowed herself to cry softly. They were not tears of sadness, but of an emotion that could not be contained in her chest. Her girl had come so far, but she had never forgotten where she came from. Elegance House, in the traditional neighborhood of the Lower East Side, did not boast the sophistication of the Greenwich boutiques. Its charm lay precisely in its authentic simplicity. Mannequins displaying diverse sizes, affordable prices written on small paper cards, and the sincere service that Mrs. Marcia had maintained for over 40 years. "Constance, it's been so long." The grey-haired lady warmly hugged her old customer. "And this must be the famous Danielle. My goodness, how you've grown. The last time I saw you, you were getting ready for your college exams." Constance smiled, feeling immediately welcomed. "Mrs. Marcia, we need a dress for my mother. Something elegant for an important ceremony," Danielle explained. Of course. I set aside a few options when you called. Come with me." As they followed Mrs. Marcia to the dressing room, Danielle watched her mother. There was a lightness in her steps today, different from the tension of the previous day. Here Constance was not an intruder. She was welcome. In the spacious dressing room, several dresses awaited. Mrs. Marcia knew Constance's style well, sober colors, classic cuts, nothing too extravagant. The first was a dark green dress, midi-length with 3/4 sleeves. The second, a skirt and blazer set in a burgundy tone. The third, a navy blue dress with delicate lace details at the neckline. "I'll leave you to it. If you need anything, just call," Mrs. Marcia said, closing the curtain. Alone with her mother, Danielle sat on the small stool and watched as Constance tried on the first dress. She remembered how she had gotten here, the unlikely path that had led her from a humble room in the Bronx to international recognition. After graduating from Columbia, Danielle had gotten a job as a developer at a major tech company. The salary, for someone who had always lived with the bare minimum, seemed like a fortune. Her first order of business was to buy the apartment where they now lived, freeing her mother from the rent that consumed a large part of her income. "What do you think of this one, honey?" Constance asked, interrupting her thoughts. The green dress fit well, but it didn't bring the sparkle to her mother's eyes that Danielle had hoped to see. "It's nice, but let's see the others." While Constance tried on the second model, Danielle continued her dive into memories. The opportunity that changed her life had arisen during the 2020 pandemic. With schools closed, she realized that thousands of public school students lacked adequate access to remote learning. Using her savings and working in her spare time, she developed a simple app that allowed access to educational content even when offline, once downloaded. EduTech Liberty started small, primarily serving public schools in the Bronx. Danielle distributed refurbished tablets with the app for free to low-income students, funding the project with her own salary. The key difference: adapting the content to the reality of the inner city. using examples and language that made sense to those young people. "This one isn't quite what I imagined either," Constance commented, now wearing the burgundy set. "It looks too serious, like I'm going to a job interview." "You're right. Try the blue one." The project grew organically. Public school teachers began recommending the app. A story in a local newspaper caught the attention of an angel investor who, impressed by the social impact, offered seed capital to expand. Danielle resigned from her corporate job and dove headfirst into her venture. The turning point came when UNESCO recognized EduTech Liberty as one of the 10 most innovative initiatives in inclusive digital education in Latin America. Suddenly, doors opened. Major investors showed interest. State governments proposed partnerships. Danielle, who had grown up seeing her mother made invisible, was now in the spotlight. "Danielle." Constance's voice had a different tone now. Danielle looked up and was left speechless. The navy blue dress transformed Constance. The cut flattered her mature curves. The lace at the neckline added elegance without being over the top, and the ankle-length hem was perfectly suited for the occasion. But it wasn't just the dress, it was Constance's expression. For the first time in a long time, she looked at herself in the mirror and seemed to recognize her own beauty. "You look stunning, Mom." Danielle stood up, moved. "This is the one." "Do you really think so? Isn't it too much for me?" The question revealed decades of eroded self-esteem, of believing herself unworthy of beauty and recognition. Danielle felt a lump in her throat. "Mom, nothing is too much for you. You deserve this and so much more." Mrs. Marcia, who had been discreetly watching through a crack in the curtain, came in applauding. "Constance, it looks like it was made for you. I'll just adjust the hem and it will be ready in an hour. You can grab a coffee at the corner while you wait." At the small cafe, mother and daughter sat by the window. Danielle ordered a cappuccino, and Constance, true to her simple habits, a drip coffee with buttered toast. While they waited, Danielle noticed her mother seemed restless. "Is something bothering you, Mom?" Constance hesitated, stirring her spoon in her cup. "I'm nervous about this ceremony. Important people will be there, journalists. What if I do something wrong? What if I embarrass you?" The vulnerability in Constance's voice broke Danielle's heart. It was the fear of not belonging, of being judged as inferior, of tarnishing her daughter's reputation just by being who she was. "Mom, look at me." Danielle held her mother's hands across the table. "You could never embarrass me. On the contrary, having you by my side is my greatest pride. If I am who I am today, it's because I have your values, your strength, your dignity. These people should be the ones who feel honored to be in the presence of someone like you." The words seemed to calm Constance momentarily, but Danielle knew that look well. There was something else. "There's something else, isn't there?" Constance sighed deeply. "Yesterday at the store, when those young women treated me that way, it wasn't the first time, you know. I'm used to being invisible, to being treated as if I don't deserve respect. But what hurt me was thinking that no matter how far you've come, the world will still see me as just the housekeeper. And I'm afraid that will reflect on you, that people will think, how can someone so sophisticated have come from someone so simple?" Danielle felt a wave of indignation wash over her, followed by a deep sadness. How could her mother not see her own worth? How had the world been so cruel as to convince her that her existence was lesser? "Mom, I'm going to tell you something I've never told you before." Danielle sat up straight in her chair. "When I founded EduTech, my greatest business model wasn't some Silicon Valley guru or tech tycoon. It was you." Constance frowned, confused. "Me? What do I know about apps or companies?" "Everything I needed to know about persistence, hard work, and purpose, I learned from you. When investors asked what my competitive advantage was, I answered, truly understanding the reality of those who need education the most. And that came from you. From seeing how you valued every book you managed to get for me, every opportunity to study." Danielle paused, taking a sip of her cappuccino. "Do you know why EduTech succeeded when so many other educational startups failed? Because we didn't create for an idealized audience. We created with reality in mind. Families that share a single cell phone, neighborhoods without stable internet, students who have to work. I understood these needs because I lived that reality. Because you showed me how to overcome limitations without losing dignity." Constance listened intently, her eyes misty. Deep down, Mom, EduTech Liberty is a tribute to you. Every time a student from an inner-city neighborhood gets access to quality content and transforms their life through education, it's as if I'm paying back a small part of the debt I owe you. The waiter brought the buttered toast, momentarily interrupting the conversation. When he walked away, Constance finally let a tear roll down her cheek. You don't owe me anything, Danielle. I did what any mother would do. No, Mom, you did much more than many could have done in the same circumstances. You could have given up, surrendered to despair, raised me with bitterness. Instead, you taught me to dream even when everything seemed impossible. Danielle opened her purse and took out a small envelope. I was going to save this for after the ceremony, but I think this is the right moment. She handed the envelope to Constance, who opened it carefully. Inside was a deed. What is this, honey? It's the deed to a small property on the Jersey Shore. I bought it for you. It's small, but it has an ocean view. I'm going to build a house there for you, so you can rest on the weekends, have your friends over, and feel the sea breeze you always dreamed of having nearby. Constance brought her hand to her mouth, unable to contain her emotion. Danielle, this is... I can't accept this. It's too much. It's just the beginning, Mom. A small return for everything you gave me. And it's not a gift, it's yours by right. Every brick of that future house represents a day you worked without rest so that I could have a better future. They hugged across the table, ignoring the curious glances of other customers. In that moment, there were no social expectations or external judgments, only the deep love between a mother who had given everything and a daughter who had never forgotten where she came from. When they returned to Elegant's house, the dress was ready. Constance tried it on again, but now there was something different in her eyes, a new confidence, a gleam of self-affirmation. It's perfect, declared Mrs. Marcia, adjusting the last detail. Constance, you're going to be the most elegant woman at that event. Thank you, Marcia. For everything. Danielle paid for the dress, refusing the discount Mrs. Marcia insisted on offering. As they left the store, she commented, You know what I admire most about you, Mom? Your ability to remain genuine. You never let the world harden your heart. That's because I learned early on that dignity isn't in what we possess, but in how we treat others, Constance replied, holding the bag with the dress against her chest. And tomorrow, honey, I will stand by your side not as your shadow, but as your root. The crystal ballroom at the Meridian Hotel was resplendent that night. Modern design chandeliers cast soft light on tables, impeccably decorated with arrangements of white orchids. New York's business elite circulated among glasses of champagne and gourmet canapes, in a social dance so characteristic of these events. It was the night of the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award, one of the most prestigious honors in the country's technology and innovation sector. In the front row, a seat had been specially reserved. Mrs. Constance Johnson, a golden plaque on the red velvet of the chair. In the makeshift dressing room for the awardees, Danielle adjusted her emerald green dress. She had opted for a high bun that highlighted the striking features of her face and makeup that enhanced her dark skin. Around her neck, a single adornment, the small necklace with a bird pendant that her mother had given her for her Columbia graduation, bought with months of savings. Nervous? Asked James, her business partner and friend since college. A little. Not about the award, but about the speech. James adjusted his tie, looking at her in the mirror. You've spoken to bigger audiences at international conferences. Why the nerves now? Danielle turned to face him directly. Because tonight I'm not going to talk about technology or business models. I'm going to talk about something much more important. The tone of her voice indicated there was no room for more questions. James nodded, respecting the moment. Has your mother arrived yet? Yes, Marcella escorted her to the reserved seat. Danielle smiled. You should have seen the look on some of the guests' faces when they found out the front row VIP seat was for a former housekeeper, and mother of the woman who is revolutionizing digital education in this country. James completed. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was Marcella, the marketing director of EduTech America. Danielle, it's time. They're about to call the finalists. Danielle took a deep breath, straightened her dress one last time, and followed Marcella down the corridor leading to the main ballroom. On the way, she met the other 4 finalists in the social entrepreneurship category. A young man who had created a clean energy startup for rural Appalachian communities, a woman who had developed a digital bank focused on microloans for women in the inner city, a couple who had revolutionized the recycling system in low-income housing projects, and an older gentleman, the creator of an urban farming method adapted for small spaces, competitors on paper, allies in practice. They all greeted each other with mutual respect, recognizing that regardless of the winner, each project was already a victory for the country. When they entered the ballroom, a buzz of anticipation rippled through the room. The finalists were led to a special table near the stage. From her seat, Danielle could see her mother in the front row, radiant in the navy blue dress. Beside her, surprisingly, was Mrs. Celeste, the former employer who had helped her so much, now in her vibrant 80s. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." The deep voice of the host, a well-known business journalist, echoed through the sound system. "It is with great honor that we begin the 10th edition of the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award." The sponsor's speech followed, then a brief address from the Secretary of Commerce, who was present, and finally the awaited moment, the presentation of the finalists, with short videos showing the impact of each project. When the video for EduTech America began, Danielle felt her heart race. The images showed students from various inner-city neighborhoods across the country using the app, emotional testimonials from parents seeing their children get into college, and teachers describing the transformation in their schools. The journey from a simple offline app to a comprehensive platform that now served over 2 million students nationwide. What the video didn't show, what no one in that ballroom knew, was the true story behind that company. No one saw the nights Danielle had fallen asleep on her keyboard, exhausted but determined. The loans rejected by banks that didn't believe in a young black woman from the Bronx. The closed doors, the veiled suspicions, the harassment disguised as professional guidance. And above all, the silent strength that drove her. The example of a woman who had cleaned the floors others walked on, so that she could fly higher. And the winner of the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award is... The host made the customary dramatic pause as a drum roll filled the room. Danielle Johnson from EduTech America. The applause was deafening. Danielle rose with the quiet elegance that characterized her. She hugged the other finalists and walked onto the stage. She received the crystal trophy from the secretary, exchanged formal smiles for the photographs, and finally stood before the microphone. Silence fell over the ballroom. Everyone expected the traditional speech. Thanks to the team, mentions of investors, perhaps an inspiring quote from some business guru. But Danielle had other plans. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to receive this recognition, which I share with every member of the incredible team at EduTech America." She paused briefly, her eyes scanning the room until they met her mother's. "But tonight, I'm not going to talk about technology, innovation, or impact metrics. I'm going to talk about invisibility." A curious murmur went through the room. It was not the opening they expected. "Yesterday, my mother went into a department store to buy a dress for this ceremony. She was ignored, then mistreated, and finally dismissed by salespeople who judged, based solely on her appearance, that she did not belong in that space. It wasn't the first time this has happened to her. It probably won't be the last." Danielle noticed the growing discomfort in the audience. Some shifted in their seats. Others exchanged uneasy glances. The topic was not what they had anticipated for a night of celebration. But she continued, "My mother, Constance Johnson, worked as a domestic housekeeper for over 35 years. She woke up at 4 in the morning to clean houses where she was rarely seen as a complete human being. She raised me alone after being widowed at 22. She saved every penny so that I could study. She gave up medical treatments, small pleasures, moments of rest, all so that I could have opportunities she never had." Danielle's voice remained firm, but heavy with emotion. On stage, under the lights, she was finally telling the story America needed to hear. "I am here today because a woman who was invisible to society refused to be invisible to her daughter, because she taught me that dignity is not lost through honest work, no matter what it is. Because she showed me that even when the world tries to diminish you, you can remain whole." Danielle gestured to the crystal trophy. "This award celebrates social innovation. But what is social innovation, if not the ability to see the invisible, to recognize value where others see only service, to elevate voices silenced by centuries of inequality? The audience, initially uncomfortable, was now listening in respectful silence. A few people discreetly wiped away tears. EduTech America was born from this premise. Education is not a privilege, it is a right. And rights should not depend on your zip code, your last name, or your bank account. We created a platform that works offline, because we know that unlimited internet is a luxury in the inner city. We developed contextualized content, because we understand that examples from Wall Street don't make sense in the South Bronx. We offer material in audio format because we respect working mothers and fathers who can only study during their commute on the bus. Danielle paused, took a sip of water, and went on. But our greatest innovation is not technological, it is human. It is seeing potential where others see deficiency. It is understanding that the cleaning lady could be the mother of a future scientist, that the delivery driver might be a brilliant mathematician in hiding, that the housekeeper who barely had a chance to study might be raising, with invisible sacrifice, the country's next great entrepreneur. At that moment, her eyes met Constance's. Her mother was crying silently, her hands clasped in her lap as if in prayer. "Mom," Danielle addressed her directly, ignoring protocol, "this award is yours. You are the one who planted the seed from which I grew. It was your example of unshakable dignity that taught me the true meaning of human value. If today millions of young people from underserved communities have new opportunities through our platform, it is because you taught me that no dream is too big when you have purpose." The silence in the ballroom was almost palpable. Danielle turned back to the general audience. "To conclude, I want to propose a challenge to every person in this room. The next time you are served by a housekeeper, a doorman, a cashier, by any worker considered invisible, look that person in the eye. Ask their name. Treat them with the dignity that every human being deserves, because perhaps in that seemingly mundane interaction, you will be planting the seed of the next great social transformation in America." Danielle raised the trophy. "I accept this award with humility and gratitude, and I dedicate it to the woman who taught me that true greatness is not measured by titles or possessions, but by the ability to lift others as you rise." Thank you, Mom. Thank you, EduTech team. Thank you to everyone who believed in our dream. For a few seconds, the ballroom remained in complete silence. Then, like a wave that starts small and grows into a tsunami, the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. It was not just a polite applause. It was a genuine recognition, a tribute not only to Danielle, but to all the invisible Constances of America. From the stage, Danielle saw something she would never forget. Constance, her mother on her feet, being applauded by CEOs, secretaries, investors, the very people who might have never truly looked at their own housekeepers. For a fleeting instant, the social barriers seemed to have been broken. Upon leaving the stage, Danielle went straight to her mother's side. They embraced for a long time without words, because some emotions transcend language. The master of ceremonies tried to resume the event's schedule, announcing dinner. But something had changed in the atmosphere. The conversations were different, more reflective. At several tables, executives shared stories of their own origins, many publicly acknowledging, some for the first time, the role of invisible workers in their own journeys. "Your daughter just made history," Mrs. Celeste commented, sitting next to Constance as Danielle was surrounded by journalists. "Not just for the award, but for bringing truth to a setting that often thrives on appearances." Constance nodded, still emotional. "I always knew she was special. Ever since she was little, she had this ability to see beyond the surface. She takes after her mother," Mrs. Celeste replied, affectionately squeezing the hand of her former employee, now her friend. During dinner, Danielle noticed something unusual. Several business leaders made a point of coming to their table to congratulate not just her, but especially her mother. Some shared stories about their own mothers, grandmothers, relatives who had been domestic workers, stories usually omitted from executive profiles and corporate biographies. One of them, Vincent Mendez, CEO of one of the country's largest retail chains, approached with particular interest. "Ms. Johnson, your speech touched me deeply," he said, addressing Danielle. Then he turned to Constance. "Ma'am, I would like to apologize to you personally." Constance looked at him, confused. "I'm sorry, but do we know each other?" "Not directly," he replied, visibly embarrassed. "But the store where you were mistreated yesterday belongs to our group." Danielle and Constance exchanged surprised glances. The world seemed smaller than they had imagined. One of the sales associates recognized you from the event photos that started circulating on social media. She contacted management, and the issue was escalated to me. Vincent continued, I want you to know that this behavior does not reflect the values we preach. We will take action. What kind of action? Danielle asked, her tone gently challenging. Well, disciplinary measures for those involved, certainly, and, if I may, Mr. Mendez, Danielle interrupted, punishing individuals doesn't solve the systemic problem. What happened to my mother is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a culture that needs to be transformed. Vincent seemed genuinely interested. I'm open to suggestions. How about a structured diversity and inclusion training program for all employees? Not just about race, but also about social class, age, and appearance. Danielle spoke with the confidence of someone who knew the subject deeply. Better yet, why not revise your hiring policies to include people from more diverse backgrounds, especially in customer-facing positions? Interesting, Vincent pondered. But that would be a considerable investment. An investment with a guaranteed return, Danielle countered. Customers who feel represented and respected are more loyal. Diverse employees bring perspectives that drive innovation, not to mention the company's image, which is strengthened by being truly inclusive, not just in advertising campaigns, but in daily practice. The conversation continued throughout dinner. What had started as an apology turned into a productive discussion about corporate transformation. Vincent, initially on the defensive, gradually opened up to possibilities he had never considered. Before leaving, he handed his card to Danielle. I would like to continue this conversation in a more formal setting. I think your company and ours could develop something truly transformative together. I'd be happy to schedule a meeting, Danielle replied. Then, with a gentle but firm smile, she added, and I hope my mother can participate. Her perspective would be invaluable to the project. Vincent, a bit surprised, eventually smiled. It would be an honor. Mrs. Johnson. When he walked away, Constance turned to her daughter, stunned. Danielle, did you just include me in a corporate meeting? Yes, Mum, because no one knows the reality we want to change better than you do. Constance shook her head, a mix of admiration and apprehension. And what am I going to say in a room full of executives? Danielle held her mother's hands in hers. The truth, Mum, exactly as you always taught me. 2 weeks after the award ceremony, Constance's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. Danielle's speech went viral on social media, sparking a national debate about social invisibility and the dignity of domestic work. Newspapers, magazines, and television shows sought interviews with the inspiration behind the great entrepreneur. On that sunny Thursday morning, Constance nervously adjusted the simple necklace over the turquoise blouse Danielle had insisted she wear for the meeting. They were on the 28th floor of an imposing building on Park Avenue, the headquarters of the Mendez Retail Group, one of the largest retail chains in the country. Mom, relax, Danielle smiled, sensing her mother's nervousness as they waited in the boardroom. You're here because your voice is important. I still don't understand why a man like Vincent Mendez wants to listen to a retired housekeeper, Constance replied, smoothing out non-existent wrinkles in her skirt. Exactly, because you're not just a retired housekeeper. You are a woman with decades of experiences and observations that can completely transform how companies like this see their customers and employees. The door opened and Vincent Mendez entered, accompanied by a team of executives, all in formal attire, with leather briefcases and serious expressions. The contrast with Constance was stark, but something had changed. The respect in their eyes was genuine. Mrs. Johnson, what a pleasure to have you here. Vincent greeted her first, breaking corporate protocol. Danielle, thank you for making this possible. After formal introductions, everyone settled around the large conference table. Vincent began the conversation. As I promised at the event, our company is committed to implementing real changes following the incident Mrs. Johnson experienced. We've prepared an initial proposal for a diversity and inclusion training program, but before we move forward, we would very much like to hear your perspectives. Danielle nodded, but before she could speak, Constance surprised everyone, including her daughter. If you'll permit me, Her voice was soft but firm. "I have a simple question. How many of the people who work in cleaning, security or maintenance in this building do you know by name?" An awkward silence filled the room. Vincent shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, Actually, it's not an accusation, Mr. Mendez," Constance continued. "It's just an observation. I worked for 40 years, cleaning homes and offices, where I was practically invisible. People would walk past me as if I were part of the furniture. They would discuss private matters in front of me as if I didn't exist, not out of malice, but because they simply didn't see me as someone capable of understanding or mattering." The simplicity and honesty of Constance's words captured everyone's attention. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a calm statement of fact. "You are absolutely right," Vincent acknowledged after a moment of reflection. "We are so accustomed to certain patterns that we no longer even notice. And that's where the problem lies," Danielle intervened. "This isn't just about training salespeople to be polite to all customers, regardless of their appearance. It's about a deep cultural transformation that begins with small daily interactions." The meeting went on for nearly 3 hours. What was planned as a brief consultation turned into a profound analysis of the invisible structures of inequality that permeated everything from customer service to hiring policies. Constance, initially shy, gained confidence as she realized her experiences were valued. She shared stories, observations, and small details that only someone who had lived on the margins could notice. By the end, an ambitious project had been outlined: Dignified Gazes, a comprehensive transformation program that included training, a review of hiring policies, awareness campaigns, and most importantly, the creation of a permanent advisory council composed of typically invisibilized workers who would have an active voice in the company's decisions. "Mrs. Johnson," Vincent addressed her before they concluded, "I would like to formally invite you to chair this council. No one is better suited than you to ensure that we truly listen to voices that have always been silenced." Constance was genuinely surprised. "Me? But I have no formal education. I know nothing about big companies." "Precisely," Vincent replied. "You bring a wisdom that isn't taught in MBA programs. And you won't be alone. You'll have all the necessary support." Danielle watched the scene with restrained emotion. Seeing her mother, who for decades had been treated as disposable, now being recognized for her intrinsic worth, was more gratifying than any award or professional recognition. "I will think about it carefully, Mr. Mendez," Constance replied. "It's a very big responsibility." As they left the building, Constance seemed to float. There was a different light in her eyes, a sparkle Danielle hadn't seen since she was a child. "Mom, you were incredible in there," Danielle praised as they walked along Park Avenue. "You spoke with such wisdom, such authority." "It was strange," Constance confessed. "For a moment I forgot who I was. Or rather, I remembered who I've always been beyond the roles I've played." "And the invitation?" "Are you going to accept?" Constance paused, watching the bustle of the avenue. "You know, honey, my whole life I accepted the place they gave me, in the back of the house, at the service entrance, in conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I thought that was my destiny, that people like me didn't have the right to more." She took a deep breath, her eyes welling up. "But today in that room, I realized that I've always had something valuable to say, that my experiences matter, that my voice can make a difference. So yes, I will accept, not for me, but for all the women who are still invisible in this country." Danielle hugged her mother right there, in the middle of the busy sidewalk. Some people glanced curiously, others recognized Danielle from recent news and smiled in approval. "Shall we get lunch to celebrate?" Danielle suggested. "Only if it's at that pay-by-the-pound place we used to go to when you were in college," Constance replied. "I've never liked those fancy places where the food comes in such small portions. It feels like they're rationing it." They both laughed, walking arm in arm. The simple restaurant downtown hadn't changed much. Aluminum trays of home-style food, formica tables, the familiar aroma of seasoned beans. Constance and Danielle served themselves generously, just like in the old days. "Remember when we used to come here and share a plate to save money?" Constance asked between bites. "How could I forget? You always said you weren't hungry and gave me the bigger portion. And you pretended to believe it. Even though you knew it was a lie," Constance completed, smiling. As they ate, Constance discreetly watched a young black woman in a cleaning uniform eating alone at a corner table. The woman, about 25, ate quickly while checking the time, probably worried about her short lunch break. "I think I already know where I want to start with Mr. Mendez's project," Constance commented. "Really? Where?" "Dignified lunch breaks for cleaning and maintenance staff. Nobody deserves to swallow their food in 15 minutes. Danielle smiled, proud. "It goes far beyond that, doesn't it? You're thinking about schedules, break rooms, comfortable uniforms." "Exactly. Anyone who has never done that work has no idea how small changes can completely transform the dignity of a job." After lunch, they headed to the EduTech America headquarters, where a surprise awaited Constance. As they entered the spacious, modernly designed office, all the employees rose in a spontaneous ovation. "What is all this?" Constance asked, embarrassed by the attention. "It's their recognition for the woman who made all this possible," Danielle replied, leading her mother through the office. On the main wall of the lobby, there was something new. A large portrait of Constance had been installed next to the company's mission statement. Below it, a golden plaque read, "Constance Johnson, the invisible strength that moved mountains." Constance brought a hand to her mouth, unable to contain her emotion. "Danielle, it's only fair recognition. Mom, everyone here knows that without you there would be no EduTech America. Every line of code, every project, every achievement has your hands as its foundation." "James," Danielle's partner approached with an envelope. "Mrs. Johnson, we'd like to make something official that in practice has always been true." He handed her the envelope. "You are now officially an honorary member of the Board of Directors of EduTech America, with voting rights on the company's strategic decisions." Constance opened the envelope with trembling hands, finding a formal document with her name on it. She couldn't hold back her tears. "I don't understand anything about technology," she protested weakly. "We can handle the technology," James replied. "The purpose, the human vision, the deep understanding of who truly needs our work, you have that in abundance." Danielle watched the scene, moved. The path she had traveled from the girl who studied by candlelight when the power went out in the Bronx to the internationally acclaimed entrepreneur had been paved by her mother's silent sacrifice. It was only right that she now shared not only in the joys, but also in the decision-making power that would shape the company's future. That afternoon, as they toured the different departments of EduTech, Constance let herself be enveloped by the energy of the place. She met young programmers who had grown up in communities similar to hers, designers who transformed complex concepts into accessible interfaces for people with little technological familiarity, and educators developing contextualized content for different American realities. "You know what impresses me the most, honey?" Constance commented as she watched the development team at work. "It's that you've created a place where people like us can show their worth, where no one is invisible. I learned from the best, Mom." At the end of the day, they returned home exhausted but with full hearts. On the small balcony of their Bronx apartment, they sat to watch the sunset paint the sky pink and orange over the sea of buildings in the east. "If your father could see you now," Constance commented, her voice thick with emotion, "he would see both of us. Mom, because every achievement of mine holds your strength within it." Constance held her daughter's hand, reflecting on how much life had changed in the last few weeks. From an invisible woman to an advisor for 2 major companies, from the one who served the table to the one who sat at its head. The transformation felt like a dream, but the most important thing wasn't the titles or accolades. It was the restored dignity, the voice rediscovered. "Tomorrow I have the first meeting with the Dignified Gazes project team," Constance commented. "I'm nervous but also excited. It's going to be amazing, Mom. Just be yourself. That's all they need to hear." As night fell over New York, mother and daughter remained in contemplative silence. The city lights began to dot the landscape, like terrestrial stars. Each one represented a life, a story, perhaps a still invisible Constance, perhaps a potential Danielle waiting for her chance. "One day," Constance whispered almost to herself, "no woman will have to feel less for cleaning the floors others walk on. And until then," Danielle completed, "we'll keep reminding everyone that dignity isn't about what we do, but who we are." Danielle's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Marcella, her marketing director. "Danielle, you won't believe this. Time magazine wants to do a feature on EduTech. focusing on the story of you two. They want Mrs. Johnson on the cover with you. Danielle looked at her mother, who was listening to the conversation on speakerphone, her eyes wide with surprise. Me? On the cover of a magazine? Constance sounded incredulous. Yes! They want to tell the story behind EduTech's success. They're calling it the Invisible Revolution. How women like you have held up this country on their backs while remaining in the shadows. It's a special edition on essential workers around the world. After hanging up, Danielle found her mother looking thoughtful. You don't have to accept if you don't want to. Mom, I know you value your privacy. Constance was silent for a few moments, her gaze fixed on the horizon. You know, honey, I've spent my whole life being invisible. Now that I have a chance to be seen, I'm not accepting for vanity or personal recognition. It's because every woman who cleans houses, who cares for other people's children, who waits tables, who folds clothes in stores, needs to know that her story matters, that her work has value, that her voice deserves to be heard. So we'll do this together? Danielle asked, her voice filled with emotion. Together, Constance confirmed, squeezing her daughter's hand. Like we've always been. 6 months had passed since the award ceremony that had transformed the lives of Constance and Danielle. Spring in New York brought blooming cherry blossoms to the parks and a renewed energy to the streets. In the grand auditorium of Lincoln Center, hundreds of women awaited the start of the first national summit for domestic and day workers, a historic event organized by the Dignified Gazes Foundation. Backstage, Constance nervously adjusted the lapel microphone that the technical crew had just attached to her blouse. At 63, she had never imagined she would be about to address such a large audience. Breathe deep, Mom, Danielle smiled, tucking a stray strand of her mother's hair into place. You've faced much bigger challenges in your life. It's different, honey. It's one thing to speak in a boardroom, another to speak to hundreds of people. They are your fellow travelers on this journey. Women who have lived what you've lived, who understand every word before you even say it. Constance nodded, seeking comfort in her daughter's words. In recent months, her life had undergone a transformation she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. The Dignified Gazes Project, initially conceived as a training program for the Mendez retail chain, had taken on unexpected proportions. What began as a corporate initiative had turned into an independent foundation, funded by a consortium of companies committed to real change in labor relations. And Constance, to her own surprise, had become its face and voice. The Time magazine feature had been just the beginning. Constance's quiet revolution went viral globally, inspiring debates about the social invisibility of domestic work in various countries. Invitations to speak at conferences, give interviews, and participate in international forums followed. At first, Constance refused, intimidated by the exposure. But gradually she realized that her voice represented millions of others who had been silenced. It's time, announced the event producer, a young woman with Native American features whom Constance had made a point of hiring through the Foundation's inclusion program. You're on after the institutional video. Constance took a deep breath, straightened her turquoise blazer, her favorite color, now known as the color of dignity in the Foundation's campaigns, and walked into the wings. On the main stage, Mariana Mendez, Vincent's daughter, and now the group's director of social responsibility, was opening the event, a project that was born from a painful experience but has transformed into a powerful tool for social change. In just 6 months, the Dignified Gazes program has already impacted over 30,000 domestic workers across the United States, offering training, legal support, and most importantly, a space where their voices are heard and respected. The audience, composed mostly of Black and Latina women, many wearing work uniforms, applauded enthusiastically. Our first achievement was the implementation of the Inclusive Service Protocol in over 500 retail stores nationwide. The second was the creation of a scholarship fund that is already benefiting 250 children of domestic workers. But none of this would be possible without the woman who is about to speak to you. A woman who turned her pain into purpose and taught us that dignity is not a privilege, it is a right. The auditorium darkened, giving way to an emotional video that told Constance's story. From the flatlands of the Mississippi Delta to the New York City boroughs, from the premature loss of her husband to raising her daughter alone, from silent humiliations to the amplified voice that now represented so many others. When the lights came up again, Constance was at the center of the stage. The audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Women were crying, some holding up signs with phrases like, "We are all Constance," and "For dignity and respect." "My dear fellow travelers," Constance began, her voice initially trembling, but gaining firmness with each word, "I was never one for public speaking. I spent my life being taught to stay quiet, to take up little space, to be grateful for scraps of respect. Like many of you, I learned early on that people like us didn't have the right to dream big." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Every word resonated with similar personal histories. When I walked into that store 6 months ago, looking for a dress for my daughter's award ceremony, I had no idea that humiliation, just one more among the many we face daily, would become the turning point not only in my life, but in the lives of so many other workers. Constance paused, her eyes meeting Danielle's in the front row. "I'm not here today to tell my personal story. You already know it from the news reports and our work at the foundation. I'm here to celebrate what we have achieved together in these 6 months, and most importantly, to look toward the future we are building." With a confidence that would have surprised the Constance of a year ago, she walked across the stage as she presented the results of the Dignified Gazes program, the app that allowed for anonymous reporting of mistreatment in the workplace, the psychological support hotline for domestic workers, the vocational courses that had already benefited over 3,000 women, the partnership with law firms offering free legal support. But our greatest pride, Constance continued, is the SEED project, which today benefits 250 sons and daughters of domestic workers with full scholarships to quality educational institutions. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Many of those women knew exactly the value of education as a tool for social transformation. As a mother who scrubbed floors to see her daughter go to college, I know there is no greater gift we can offer our children than the opportunity to study, to dream, to go further than we ourselves were able to go. In the front row, Danielle discreetly wiped away a tear. Beside her, Vincent Mendez and his daughter Mariana watched with evident emotion the impact of Constance's words. Today we also officially announce the international expansion of the Dignified Gazes program. Through partnerships with organizations in Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, and Spain, we will take our methodology to other countries where domestic workers face similar challenges. New applause, even more enthusiastic. But I didn't just come to talk about achievements. I came mainly to look each of you in the eye and say, your life matters. Your work has value. Your dignity is non-negotiable. Constance's voice wavered slightly. For decades, I cleaned houses where I was invisible. I cooked on stoves that did not belong to me. I cared for children who were not my own. And like you, I often swallowed my tears just to keep going. I accepted being called by the wrong name, endured suspicion, put up with harsh words, all to provide for my family. The auditorium was in absolute silence. Many women wept silently, recognizing themselves in those words. But today I want you to know that time is over. We are not invisible. We are not disposable. Our work sustains society, allows other people to achieve their dreams, keeps the gears turning. It is time for the world to recognize this, not just with pretty words, but with concrete actions, with respected rights, with practical dignity. The audience rose again, applauding fervently. Some women raised their fists in a sign of resistance and solidarity. And to conclude, Constance continued as the applause subsided, I have a special announcement. The Dignified Gazes Foundation, in partnership with EduTech America and 3 public universities, is today launching the first university degree in professional household management in the United States. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the auditorium. Yes, my dears, a university degree that recognizes and values the knowledge we have accumulated through experience. That transforms years of practical experience into a formal qualification. That elevates domestic work to the status it has always deserved, that of an essential profession that requires specific skills, technical knowledge, and proper training. The reaction was explosive. Women hugged each other emotionally. Some jumped for joy, others simply cried in silent gratitude. Enrollment begins today. The course will be hybrid, with in-person classes on weekends and online content available 24/7, respecting the realities of our work schedules. And most importantly, all 500 spots in the first class will be completely free, with transportation and meal stipends guaranteed by the foundation. When Constance finished her speech, Lincoln Center was vibrating with an energy that transcended simple approval. It was the energy of concrete hope, of restored dignity, of elevated collective self-esteem. Danielle went up on stage to hug her mother, both visibly moved. The gesture, spontaneous and genuine, captured the essence of what they had built together, a legacy of respect that went beyond their personal stories and touched thousands of other lives. Backstage after the speech, Constance was surrounded by workers who wanted to hug her, thank her, share their own stories. Every account, every tear, every smile of renewed hope confirmed that the path they had chosen was the right one. Mrs. Johnson approached a woman of about 70, still wearing a work uniform. "You said everything I've held in my heart for 50 years. Thank you for giving us a voice." Constance hugged her for a long time. In that embrace, there was the mutual recognition of parallel lives, of similar struggles, of shared pains. Hours later, after countless photos, interviews, and greetings, Constance and Danielle finally had a moment of privacy in the dressing room. "Mom, you were simply incredible." Danielle held her mother's hands in hers. "Did you see the impact of your words? Did you see how many lives you are transforming?" Constance smiled, exhausted but fulfilled. "It still feels like a dream, honey. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and think I have to rush so I don't miss the 5 o'clock bus, that I have 3 houses to clean that day. But it's not a dream. It's real. You built this with your own strength." "We built it," Constance corrected. "If you hadn't taken that step in the store that day, I would have continued to accept invisibility as my destiny." Danielle shook her head, gently disagreeing. "No, Mom. The seed was always in you. The quiet dignity with which you faced every challenge, the strength with which you raised me, the values you passed on to me, that's what brought us here. I just opened a door that was already ready to be opened." A light knock on the door interrupted them. It was Mariana Mendez. "Sorry to interrupt, but we need Mrs. Johnson for the official signing of the agreement with the universities." "I'm on my way," Constance replied, standing up. Before leaving, she turned to her daughter. "Coming with me?" "Always, Mom, always." In the convention hall attached to the theater, representatives from the 3 partner universities, executives from supporting companies, and officials waited for the formal signing ceremony of the agreement, creating the country's first university degree in professional household management. A historic milestone that would transform not only the lives of the workers, but the very social perception of domestic work. As she signed the documents under the flash of photographers' cameras, Constance couldn't help but think of the sweet irony of fate. The woman who for decades had entered through service doors was now welcomed through the front door. The voice that had been silenced was now amplified in packed auditoriums. The hands that had cleaned up others' messes were now signing agreements that would transform lives. After the ceremony, a journalist approached for one last question. "Mrs. Johnson, after all you've achieved, what is your next dream?" Constance looked at Danielle before answering, a serene smile on her lips. "My dream is that one day no one will have to dream of the basics anymore. That dignity, respect, and opportunity are not privileges to be won, but rights guaranteed to all regardless of where they were born or the work they do." The journalist wrote intently, visibly touched by the answer. "And there's one more thing," Constance added. "I dream of the day when stories like mine are not the exception, but the rule. When every woman who cleans the floors others walk on can see her value recognized, not just when her daughter becomes a famous entrepreneur, but for the simple fact of being who she is, a complete human being, with dreams, talents, and inherent dignity." At the end of that extraordinary day, Constance and Danielle returned to the small apartment in the Bronx. Despite all the changes in their lives, Constance had refused to move. "My roots are here," she had explained to her daughter. "I don't want to forget where I came from, and I don't want others to forget either." On the simple balcony, overlooking the horizon dotted with antennas and water towers, Mother and daughter contemplated the sunset in contemplative silence. "You know, Mom," Danielle finally said, "I think I understood something fundamental today. Watching you on that stage." "What's that, honey?" "That true wealth isn't measured by material possessions or titles, but by the ability to transform pain into purpose. And in that, you have always been the richest person I've ever known." Constance smiled, her eyes misty from the day's emotions. "And you, my daughter, were the greatest wealth life ever gave me." It was all worth it. The two remained in an embrace, watching the New York sky slowly fill with stars. In the background, on Danielle's phone, notifications kept coming. Messages of admiration for Constance's speech, interview requests, invitations for new projects. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What truly mattered was right there, in that embrace that united two generations of strong women who, together, had proven that dignity is not a matter of circumstance, but of essence. And so, in the heart of the New York City boroughs, under the same sky that had witnessed so many silent tears, now shone the light of hope, not just for Constance and Danielle, but for thousands of other women who, inspired by their story, were beginning to raise their voices and claim their rightful place in a world that had for too long relegated them to the shadows. The next day, the country's most important newspaper would feature on its front page a photo of Constance on stage, her arms raised in a sign of victory, under the headline that perfectly summarized her journey, "The Dignity Revolution, How a Housekeeper is Rewriting the Rules of Respect in America." And so, the story that began with a humiliation in a department store had transformed into a powerful movement for social change, proving once again that, as Constance had always told her daughter in the most difficult times, no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes for those who have the courage to keep standing. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Constance and Danielle has touched your hearts, showing how human dignity transcends any social barrier. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other equally powerful stories about overcoming adversity and transformation. You can find it by clicking here on the side. If this narrative sparked something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexities and beauties of American life in all its diversity. And have you had a social or personal transformation experience you'd like to share? We eagerly await your comments.